Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by HoneyTree REIT and PropertyCast.io. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I have Sarah Larbi with me today. And for those of you who don't know her, she left her corporate job back in 2020 after investing in real estate since 2013. In the beginning, her focus was on the BRRRR strategy, but she's now branched out into new build developments, midterm rentals, as well as Inspire Beach Resort. Her results-oriented approach has been featured in Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, the Canadian Real Estate Wealth Magazine, and 1010 News Talk Radio. She's often on many finance-focused podcasts. She's also the host of her own podcast, which is one of the top 50 rated real estate investing podcasts featuring guests from all across North America. And more recently, she's also been the co-host of regular investor and entrepreneur events, including a monthly event at her own Inspire Beach Resort. So thank you so much for being here, Sarah. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Great, thank you. So I guess just to get things started, obviously you have done a lot in a relatively short span of time, and you are one of the younger investors, at least that I've met. So maybe you can take us back to the beginning and share how you got into real estate investing and kind of bridge the gap to where you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I started back in 2013 when I realized I did not want to work full time and for somebody else forever. And real estate kept coming back when I was doing some research as one of those, top choices of how people, create wealth and leave their 9 to 5. And so started off with some buy and hold, then got into the BRRRR strategy, then some conversions, then some land development, then resorts. And then from a rental standpoint, long-term and then short-term rentals and then midterm rentals and everything in between.
Yeah.
And that was, a little over 10 years ago now.
So when you first started, can you talk a little bit about where your portfolio was and kind of how you segued between each of those things? Because I understand, buying property and fixing it up, either refinancing it, using that money to keep on repurposing it. Obviously, that's been a really popular strategy as the market has, been trending upwards for many, many years up until, the interest rates started going up. But maybe you can talk about that first property and, how that whole process went for you.
Yeah, the first one was me cashing out some of my commissions rather than using vacation. Back in the day, that job allowed us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And found the cheapest thing I could afford, and then found my sister-in-law as the renter. Didn't know what we didn't know. It was lots of learning by trial and error along the way.
Yeah.
But essentially over time, like I remember at one point I had 2 jobs. One was not paying well enough, so I had to get a second job, but saved some money and bought the first 2 and then realized that you can actually refinance some of them. And in the beginning, we were just going to the bank, and the bank is not going to really give you these strategies. Found a mortgage broker, Streetwise Mortgages, who I've worked since, likely at that third property. And then realized that there's a way to refinance, to pull money out, to repeat, and did that for about 10 properties. And then at that point in time, when we did that, we had a mix of short-term, midterm, midterm as well, short-term, and some long-term. We had some tenants turn around over, and rates were still low back then, and decided I was, good where I was at, and work was getting in the way, and it was time to, continue my passion and figure out what that was going to be. So in 2020, I gave 6 months notice, and decided to continue. I didn't know where, I thought I was retiring. So much for that. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just hard as even entrepreneurs, right? There's always new projects and things you want to do, but that's where I was at when I finished. Essentially working corporate, and it was good. I was just sitting at the cottage on the dock one day and realized I was paying too much in taxes. Worked with my mortgage broker to refinance what we could, since not having a T4 income changes obviously your refinancing ability. And then that was in 2020. Since then,
just going back to when you just made a comment, and I just wanted to dig into it a little bit more. You're talking about when you first started out, some of those lessons and not knowing what you don't know. When you look back at when you started out, what were some of those big challenges and lessons that, you wish maybe you could have done something a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, the big one was from a financing standpoint and just not understanding how to, use that to your advantage as early on. But I think that's a big one, going and working with a mortgage broker that's actually going to work for you.
Yeah.
And then in the beginning, we weren't really screening tenants that great. And, almost got caught by a few, a few quote unquote professionals.
Yeah.
Gave it, probably a little too many exceptions in the beginning and, and then created a process afterwards on, screening and vetting tenants. But, the sister-in-law was definitely up there with some of the worst
Oh dear.
of them that trashed the
Hopefully
house.
she's not
And
watching.
no, I don't think she does. I mean, we're okay now, but she was definitely an example of I think why my husband didn't want to do real estate in the beginning, and he didn't want to have tenants that don't pay and trash the house. And and like again, we're family, but that's what she did, and we had to renovate that house all over again when they moved out.
Oh no.
But you know
Yeah.
what? It's all good. Look, that one we bought for 130. We actually just sold it. It just closed last week for 380. Very, very tiny house from the 1850s. Somehow it's still standing. But
Yeah.
there's lots of mistakes along the way. And I think over time you really build the processes from experience, right?
Yeah.
And I kept listening to podcasts, joining networking events, created some of my own along the way.
Yeah.
But there's always challenges. I think it's just going to be part of the game, like even, with these rates, even with the,
Yeah.
new government to implementing these crazy taxes. Like there's ways that you can maneuver, I think, and roll with the punches, but it's definitely a long-term play.
Now, when you talk about screening tenants, I know that's one thing that for people in Ontario, they're hesitant to start investing because they don't want to have a property that's maybe outside of the province, but then they're also scared to invest
Mhm.
closer to home because you've got these crazy LTV rules and stuff like that. So can you talk a little bit about how you're screening people better now and what's embedded in that process to make sure that you are finding quality tenants and you're not going to run into major issues down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, like in 2024, I'm no longer doing it on my own. But prior to that, when I did have like a 5-step process. So the first step was actually like creating an ad with specific questions, and there were like 5 specific questions. And if they can't, respond to those, and I wasn't happy with the answers, they would be
Yeah.
screened out. So they were just measures to screen them out. Step 2 was more of like a phone screening. Before I showed them the property. Step 3
Yeah.
was actually I created like a 3-page questionnaire that they actually fill out as well with their applications.
Yeah.
And then, step 4 is when you have the application, you're doing all the Canley screenings, the open room screening, like going
Yeah.
through with your paralegal. Like paralegals have access to different things as well in the back end that they can check for
Yeah.
you. Calling references and and then working with a paralegal to create an addendum to the Ontario standard lease. So, I summarized it very quickly, but there are 5
Yeah.
steps. It does take quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
But a lot of the tenants that are those professional tenants that you're gonna not want, in a bad way, professional, they'll realize that your process is pretty thorough and they'll give up along the way.
Yeah. No, I think that's good to know. And it's helpful just to, give people hope that if they do want to invest here, there are ways that you can go about it successfully. Now,
Mhm.
when you talk about expanding your portfolio, can you talk about some of the challenges and obstacles that you would have faced just as you started to go into different realms? Like obviously you've got the beach
Mhm.
resort, you've done
Mhm.
development, like those aren't simple
Mhm.
things, right? So can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about those?
Yeah, so in 2020, when I decided to stop, I stopped probably for about 6 months, and then I just started being a little bit bored, and then found some land, and then found some more land, and then decided to go buy a bunch of properties in Hamilton with some JVs. But I think, when you have a little bit more time, you can be more creative.
Yeah.
The resort was actually negotiated through a vendor take back. He had it listed on MLS. I was probably sitting there zoned as a resort specifically, which is what I was looking for. Because I'm like, let's just do some tiny homes or something fun. I
Yeah.
had some Airbnb cottages as well. And the market was doing quite well then. I mean, it's definitely, changed a lot since then. I don't think people have the same disposable income, but it was 6 acres of land. And right now we're finished phase 1 of probably a 5-year projection. Um, we bought that VTB. He did a first position VTB at like 5% for the first couple years. We paid that back since on I believe it was like 80%. So we
Yeah.
essentially had 20% down payment, and then we used private lending, private funds for the renovation, and then we went to Kawartha Credit Union to refinance it out.
Yeah.
And then, since then, obviously, like the rates have increased, the market's definitely not doing as well. And also, like, people just don't have the same kind of disposable income.
Yeah.
So we just have to ride through that wave. It's definitely, not always glamorous and it's not always upside. Like there are, I think in the last year and a bit, like, we're all feeling it, myself included.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I had the chance to see you speak, you talked about pivoting when there are these challenges. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, what you've done to try to mitigate these impacts so it doesn't hurt your bottom line too much.
Yeah, a lot of the new projects are like 4 unit conversions. So we have, 4 rents that can come from it. Which is I think, in this market with these high rates and everything just costing so much money, I don't think the single family properties make as much sense in the markets that I was buying in. So
Yeah.
most of it is 4 units. We have a 22-unit conversion that we're converting from commercial to residential
Yeah.
using the MLI program, which is also another pivot point. And then there's midterm rental properties. So, with all the bylaws that are coming with the short-term rentals, and obviously like you mentioned, LTB being backlogged, and the RTA being in Ontario Residential Tenancies Act not super in our favor. That, gray zone is that 30 plus day stay,
Yeah.
still furnished, very similar to Airbnb in the sense of short-term rentals, but there's not as much turnover. You're not worrying about the same type of HST implications,
Yeah.
and your clients are likely homeowners in transition for whatever reason, or corporate clients.
Mhm.
And I've been doing that, myself for probably a good 6 years. Decided to make it an actual company and a business, and we've incorporated about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Now we're in 45 different cities right now across Canada, and we're
Awesome.
expanding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Now, for anyone that would want to turn their long-term rental into a midterm rental, how do they handle that to make sure that they don't get caught up in like any LTV issues?
Yeah, so we had a paralegal actually draft up a contract for us. We don't use any residential tenancies, leases, or anything like that.
Yeah.
We don't provide keys. We just do keypads. So there are certain things that you want to keep in mind. You want to make it look and feel as much as possible like a commercial property, aka Airbnb. There's
Yeah.
a couple case law that came out, one in June, one in December of 2022, that actually got voted in our favor, where the guests were found that they were not tenants in two particular cases that were, longer stays as well, and it
Yeah.
was deemed commercial. So work with a good paralegal that has worked through that. But I think the biggest thing is just understanding the guests, why they're coming in, and why they're like, when they're leaving, and what the
Yeah.
reason is. We just don't rent to tenants because that are in between tenancies. We rent to homeowners that are in between homes for renovations or
Yeah.
moving or insurance claims, or companies, and
Yeah.
and also healthcare, like traveling healthcare staff and stuff like that. But I think that's going to be the biggest understanding, is trying to figure out where your client is coming from and why they're coming.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have another primary residence, this is how you can get, in those unfortunate circumstances. So nothing is
Yeah.
foolproof. Everything has some level of risk.
Yeah.
But there are things that you can do to mitigate that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, obviously, you have done a lot of different things. When you look back at the last 11 years, what would you say is something that you're most proud of?
I think during the pandemic, when everything was happening, real estate allowed my husband to take a year off as well, and we were able to hang out at the cottage for a good chunk of time. So I think that piece is, the lifestyle piece, even though,
Yeah.
our lifestyle today with these rates and everything that's happening, and maybe not as great as, a couple of years before, but it'll come back around. But I think it's that piece, is just the lifestyle, and then just not having to work for someone else.
Yeah.
Um, and being able to, like, even though you probably work harder, make your own hours, and you can, being able to work from wherever. I mean, this podcast I'm doing at a trade show right now that we have for our midterm rental companies, which is awesome, our first trade show for the company. But I think ultimately it's, my level of risk is likely a little bit higher than others. But I don't think that you can really move forward if you don't take some risk.
Yeah.
You have to be calculated, and obviously, and you have to understand that there's going to be some ups, and there's definitely going to be some downs, and you have to be able to handle the downs.
Yeah.
Like There are months where my cash calls are $20,000 because I have to cover some, unexpected things. And I think,
Yeah.
that comes with the territory of, the risks that we take for the rewards that we get from it.
Yeah.
But it is a long-term play at the end of the day. And I think probably having that mindset is something that, I try to pride myself in because I'm pretty mellow with all the chaos that's happening in general.
Yeah.
But just being able to create that lifestyle, I think is important.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. No, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Thanks again for following along with this episode of Inspired to Invest. In addition to real estate, investing, and running my own brand experience agency for 18 years, I also published a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur in October of 2021. This is my story, and it chronicles how I turned tragedy into triumph to embrace my destiny in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in picking up a copy, you can find the link at serenahomesrealtor.com, and you can also find my link tree with all of the retailers in the details below. Thanks again for your support. Is the real estate investment you're considering a gold mine or a landmine? Introducing PropertyCast.io, the black magic of real estate investment analysis. Use PropertyCast.io to analyze and underwrite real estate investment opportunities, unlock the potential of a property, and share professional reports. Jordan McGregor is a commercial realtor and founder of PropertyCast.io. He identified the need to simplify and streamline how properties are underwritten to help investors make better decisions and sound investments. PropertyCast.io is a best-in-class purpose-built tool for real estate investment analysis. To find out more, go to PropertyCast.io, and to sign up, click the link in the show notes. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspired to Invest. I have Sarah Larbi here with me today, and she's talking about how she got started in real estate back in 2013 with the long-term rentals and the BRRRR strategy, and then she pivoted into development, multi-unit conversions, and even a resort. So I guess one of the things that I also want to know, what would you say is one of the craziest things that's happened to you as a real estate investor so far?
The craziest thing. That is a great question. Probably this resort, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a whole beast on its own.
Yeah.
Just having to pivot and having to be in the hospitality industry. But I think it's fun. I think it's, a whole new chapter. The midterm rental company, I think that's also a crazy piece that comes out of, being an investor for so long, seeing where the trends are. And then you're like, over a glass of wine, literally, I was saying to Aisha, I'm like, let's just start a company, and here we are with staff
Yeah.
and interns and everything like that. And I think you're going to be going in, bringing in some venture capital as well, and just, figuring out that whole side of things.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like anything crazy per se. I mean, once in a while you might have somebody that like recognizes you on the street.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's crazy or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Here's a good story. There was one day last year in February, the coldest day of the year, that I went to the resort as we were testing it out because it just opened with a couple friends. And it was so cold that the pipes all started freezing and the water stopped working and my
No.
cleaner was there. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not good. So we ended up having to stay in a hotel nearby. And then the next morning I woke up and we had it was a hotel, there was a restaurant downstairs. We had some drinks. It was good times. It was a little hungover in the morning, but the morning I woke up and then my building that was caught on fire because somebody had gone onto the roof and decided that they were really cold. So they started a fire and they burnt down a chunk of the mechanical room
Oh
of
gosh.
that building. And there were people like living upstairs on the roof. So those two
Uh,
things happened in less than 24 hours apart.
yeah.
Somehow I still managed to laugh it off. And in the grand scheme of things, here's the thing is that there's challenges and there's problems, and I think it's how you react to them, but things are solvable, even
Yeah.
though they don't seem like they are that
Yeah.
quick. That heat pump it was like the one off. I think it goes until -25 and everything past that it stops. So it was
Yeah.
at least like the good thing is it wasn't like a pipe issue where all our pipes all
Or
obviously.
bursting. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the
Yeah.
roof thing, we ended up getting insurance. We ended up getting a check for $85,000. So
Wow.
that helped towards the $300,000 that we had to pay the city for the development and parkland fee that they want from
Wow.
investors before we convert. So that
Wow.
helped with a little bit of that cost. But, I would say if there's one biggest crazy day, that's probably 24 hours of having a fire and,
Yeah.
your entire resort pipe freezing
Yeah.
for a
No,
whole,
that's
for a
definitely a
whole,
lot. I know
Yeah.
earlier on when you were talking about getting started that you were learning and listening to podcasts and educating yourself. What would you
Mhm.
say is some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Probably just like work on your mindset. That is the biggest thing ever, especially in times like these. Like Harry James is one of my mentors, and he's been in the business for 40 plus years, and that's the biggest thing, right? Is it's not, financial success is only like a part of your overall success. And,
Yeah.
if you don't have the fitness or the relationships or the, well-being and everything like that, then who cares about the financial piece? And
Yeah.
I think we put a lot of emphasis on that and we don't focus on the other things. And all of a sudden, when we get the financial, we
Yeah.
realize that we don't have friends, family, or others to, share it with. And so I think that's the, biggest piece of advice.
Yeah. No, I've gotten to see Harry James speak at an event a little while back, so I can understand all of that. And I think, you have to be happy with what you have while working towards what you want. So I think that's always great advice. Now you talked a little bit about, having the freedom and the lifestyle freedom. So what would you say financial freedom really means to you, whether that's a number, whether it's having that balance to have that work life, like what does that really mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, so like I'm a little crazy, but like I want to be able to work on my lifestyle as much as possible, and fitness is a big part of it. So I work out in the morning and I work out in the evening. I like to go twice a day if I can. But even having the time to be able to do that, and then having the time to be able to go to the cottage in May and come back in September if I want to, I
Yeah.
think it's a huge piece, and hang out on the boat. And I've never been the person that cared so much about like having like a big mansion. Like I'd rather just have the location freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest piece in having, friends and people around me to be able to share that with,
Yeah.
and having a good network of people that you can bounce off ideas. I think that's super successful in my opinion. And, I don't know if it's like a number per se. I think we always just want more and more and more, regardless from a
Yeah.
financial standpoint. But, like how does that change your lifestyle, and how does that like to me, having a fit body and feeling amazing is probably worth more than, an extra $1 million, as an
Yeah.
example, right? Um, being able to do what you want, where you want, how you want, I think is key. But I also think as investors and entrepreneurs, I don't think we'll ever be 100% satisfied anyways. It's just about going to the next goal and and expanding. And so I think, the next big thing for me right now is obviously getting the resort going,
Yeah.
and working on the midterm business. And why couldn't we be that, next Airbnb
Yeah. Yeah.
platform as an example? And so that's kind of what I've got on the radar in terms of goals right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so you answered my next question, which was what's
Oh,
next for you? So we got ahead,
yes.
which is awesome. But
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying when you talk about lifestyle. Like I had my own business for 18 years, and I felt like being able to take time away was kind of a testament to two things. But one was how successful the business can run without me. Like I think
Hmm.
you want to obviously have a business that doesn't rely 100% on you, but being able to be on the other side of the world and be able to check
Hmm.
emails for 10 minutes a day as opposed to being attached to it, I think is definitely for me, one of the most fulfilling parts of being an entrepreneur and now being an
Hmm.
investor, and just having that time and shifting your priorities towards like family and lifestyle balance and things like that. But I think that's why
Hmm.
most people get into investing, right? It's not to have that grind, it's to eventually have that freedom and that balance. Now, this podcast is obviously called Inspired to Invest. So I always like to ask people what their favorite inspirational quote is.
Well, with the resort, it's called Inspire Beach Resort. So we have this hashtag, be inspired.
Yeah,
So I would say likely, likely that. But you know, in terms of inspiration, in terms of a quote, I think it's just a matter of, I would just say good is better than perfect. And I think that's why I also got here today is I would rather just, or I should say done is better than perfect, because
yeah,
we're not like this midterm company is not perfect by any means. But it's existing. Our resort, not perfect, but it's existing, right? And
yeah,
sometimes we just focus so much on just trying to have everything 100% that we never get started. My podcast, when I first started it, and even now still needs work, it's never going to be perfect. And I'm okay with that.
yeah,
Because, if I didn't start back in 2017, I wouldn't be where I am today.
yeah,
And I think that that's the biggest thing is just stop with the perfectionism and then just get things done. And over time, you can make it better. And it'll never be
yeah,
perfect because things evolve and then you have new ideas and then you want to do different things. So just get it done.
yeah. And just start.
Yeah.
So for anyone that does want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way for them to find you?
SarahLarbi.com is my website, or they can email me, sarah@sarahlarbi.com. If they want to check out the resort, it's inspiredbeach.com. The midterm rental company is midtermrentalproperties.com,
Yeah.
or on Instagram, which is investor Sarah Larbi.
Okay, perfect. So we'll include all that information in the show notes below. Of course, thank you for your time. I can see you're obviously at a trade show, so we'll let you get back to that. And for anyone that is tuning in, thank you for your time. Make sure that you have followed along at Inspired to Invest podcast and you have subscribed. And of course, above all else, remember when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thank you to HoneyTree REIT and PropertyCast.io for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.